Thank you for logging on and listening. Ustreamradio.com, also our internet partners, blogtalkradio.com. Yours truly, Diamond K, in here, the Jammer. How you doing, sir?
All righty, Diamond K. Back, I'm doing pretty good. Back again, my friends, with another exciting wrestling talk show here.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. And today we want to talk about some of the great managers in the sport of professional wrestling. How important is a wrestling manager to the character?
Well, like we were saying last night on the Raw Remix show, you don't have many managers days in professional wrestlers. Can you name any? Now that's on Impact or SmackDown or Raw.
Well, it's funny you say that. There's none on Impact.
Yeah, none on Impact, and I mean, they got you would think they would make Ric Flair. I guess maybe he would be considered maybe a somewhat of a manager like, and I guess maybe Vicky Guerrero.
Vicky.
Yeah, but back in the day at Diamond K, I tell you, the manager really was responsible for getting their protege, their talent, over.
Absolutely.
Especially for a wrestler who could not talk on the mic or whose character wasn't supposed to talk. I say that because this guy wound up being an announcer for the WWE. He's passed on, but the great Gorilla Monsoon, Gino Gorilla Monsoon, when he first started in wrestling, that's how, he was a gorilla, and gorillas did not talk. And for years and years and years, Gorilla Monsoon, it's strange, he wound up being a pretty decent, not great, play-by-play guy. But, so they were really responsible for getting Asuka over and getting their persona over, their character. The great Kamala. Kamala didn't talk. He just, he didn't talk, You had, Friday, he was the guy in charge of keeping them in line. This is all the build up to there. And then, when he was in WCCW, World Class Championship in Texas with Devon Harris, where Kamala really got his big start, Gary Hart was his manager and his mouthpiece, and Gary Hart, he would push him. He would tell the manager back then, I went to the deep, dark jungle of Africa. Here's what I found. Here comes Kamala. And this Friday, a little on the racist side, some would say back then, the black guy from the jungle that talked, right. And then you had the guy beating him who was, Friday, keep him in line and to get him off opponents. And, I mean, that's just an example of how important managers were back then. And, of course, in the WWE, back then the WWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, you pretty much had great Hall of Famers. I mean, you start with the Grand Wizard, who got his start in Detroit, being the manager for the original Sheik.
Right.
If you recall, a lot of people remember that, the great Grand Wizard. Ernie, I forget his name, Roth, I believe was his real name. He wore the turban and the glasses. Right. But, he started out in Detroit with the original Sheik in that wrestling organization on that territory. Then you had the great Captain Lou Albano, Captain Lou Albano was the Daddy Light, the maker of champions, and then when he did the Sunday Law thing, that really got him over, but he was over, the wrestling fans way before then when he was a wrestler. And then you had Freddie Blassie, classy Freddie Blassie. I mean, his resume, these are Hall of Famers, man. He was a wrestler. He was a movie. He was really big in wrestling back in the 50s and 60s, Freddie Blassie out in California, and he was on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. He was mainstream. He, Gorgeous, all those guys back then. But Freddie Blassie, Pencil Neck Geek. That was his line. And he was a manager. I mean, these guys would get these guys over, man. They were asses in the seat all up and down the East Coast in the big arenas. Not down in Charlotte, and even though the wrestling was good down there with Crockett and everything, these guys we were talking about selling out Madison Square Garden and the Capitol Center, and they wouldn't even show up in town. They were basically only mouthpieces or the TV shows. They didn't show up. They would. It was very rare that they would show up in town unless they was in a Albano would usually sometimes get in the ring, or very rare. I might have seen Albano, and I've been going to wrestling since '77. I might have seen him in Baltimore twice. Never saw the Grand Wizard.
Yeah. He
was the manager. Check this out. The Grand Wizard was the manager of superstar Billy Graham. He wasn't even a Baltimore when Graham beat San Martino in Baltimore, the big title change. One of the biggest in wrestling.
They didn't. Were the cameras there for that? For that
cameras was there, and that was very rare.
Yeah.
The cameras were set up. I'll never forget. You walk, and there was never any cameras for these matches back then. They were all basically house shows.
Right.
And but they were monthly, and they would sell out way before the night of the actual event. See, like tonight, what is the 30th? That's pretty much say the 29th. What is the 30th of May?
Right.
If they'd have a show coming up on the 28th of June, well, it'll be sold out by at least the 10th of June for in Baltimore. And these managers, mouthpieces, quote unquote, they wouldn't come to town. They'd do the Garden, because they'd do the Garden, and of course there was in Pennsylvania where they taped the shows up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. But the Grand Wizard. You had Arnold Skaaland. I think I talked to you about the Golden Boy, Arnold Skaaland. He would come to town all the time with the chant. And he just, very low key. He didn't talk. Now, he was a manager, he didn't talk. But he was Backlund's manager, and he was Bruno Sammartino's manager. And as a matter of fact, he's the one who threw the towel in the ring when Backlund submitted to the Iron Sheik in Madison Square Garden. And, of course, after that, the Iron Sheik lost to you-know-who, Hulk Hogan, who was managed by Ted Blassie when he was a bad guy back in the late 70s. Let's see. I mean, there's some great, and then, of course, we get to, I call it the cartoon era, when you had people like Slick. This guy who was a minister. He was a minister down south. I don't know if he got involved in wrestling, but Slick was over. Jive Soul Bro. He still is. He was a minister.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was always a heel manager. I don't know how he got involved in wrestling, but I did some reading on Slick. He, minister out of down south. He said he really got a chance to, even though he was quote-unquote a heel manager, really got a chance to get his frustrations out and play that character. He just got in it, what was asked of him. And you had your boy, the mouth of the South.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy Hart. The thing about Jimmy Hart getting his start in Memphis, he took the backdoor route, if you will, being a member of a rock and roll band called the Gentrys.
Exactly. There you go.
Is how he got in.
I think they had a hit record. I can't think of what it is.
They did. They had a top 5, I believe, hit.
Back in the
Keep
60s,
Dancing.
I believe.
Keep on dancing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But Jimmy Hart was a big fan, a big wrestling fan, and he actually got brought into wrestling by the King.
Jerry Lawler, that's right.
Yeah. He became Jerry Lawler's manager. Yeah.
down there in Memphis. And of course, and then he got his big break in the WWE. Then you had the Hart Foundation, and he. I didn't much of him in the WWE or back then.
Because he was so cartoon-like, yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, he was very, didn't make me dislike him. I just thought he was a goofball. But in the Memphis area, he feuded against Lawler a lot. And, and he was pretty much over there. Downtown Bruno. If you remember Downtown Bruno, who became Harvey Whipple.
I do. I do.
He was a loudmouth manager down south that really had a big feud with Jerry Lawler. I'm not sure. I'm pretty much sure that Harvey Whippleman was somehow involved with Andy Kaufman in the Jerry Lawler thing. It was Jimmy Hart or Downtown Bruno, a.k.a. Harvey Whippleman.
Right.
And then you had some female wrestlers, Sensational Sherry, God rest her soul, who was a great wrestler. But most of the time, one more thing about Hart, a lot of the theme songs, speaking of the Gentry's and his musical background, a lot of the theme songs in the 80s, he produced. He had something to do with.
Yes.
Honky Tonk Man and, all that stuff. So he took his musical knowledge and, they made the music that fits the character. But Sensational Sherry was a great manager. Back in the day, number one, Paul Jones in the NWA.
Absolutely.
Great managers. Well, in my opinion, probably one of the best, James J. Dillon. You talk
Definitely,
about
he's going in my top 5. Yes.
Oh yeah, and I want to get your list. But talk about somebody that could talk asses, or at least mine could talk some asses in the seat. But he'd take those glasses off and he'd make it plain and clear. This is the way it was going to be. He's getting with the board of directors. Boy, he could really sell that Four Horsemen thing. He was a major part. Sometimes I think really underestimated of getting that, of Ric Flair, of course, but it was something about James J. Dillon, former wrestler, not that great, that really made them seem corporate, if you will, to steal from Dusty Rhodes, if you will. If you will. But, yes, I mean, now you say you have a list. I mean, the list goes on and on.
JJ, he had a very interesting list of wrestlers that he managed. A lot of people don't know he managed Abdullah the Butcher, and sometimes J.J. Dillon. That is.
Sure.
Of course, Buddy Landell, Ox Baker.
Wow,
and of course
you talk about a frightening guy, Ox Baker.
Yeah, Ox Baker, Black Bart, Ron Bass.
Wow.
And of course the Four Horsemen.
Yep.
And as you said, if a wrestler couldn't make it as a wrestler, but he had that talking ability,
they got too old, or the wrestling business had passed them by, then they would turn into managers and mouthpieces.
Absolutely. And the all-time best professional wrestling manager, in your opinion, is who? Wow.
I figured you was going to ask me that.
Absolutely.
That's a I thought the Wizard was good, even though, he never took any bumps. You never got your hands on that guy, Ernie Roth. He was a little guy anyway. But he was good. He'd had the water around the mouth, and McMahon, and we got to, wow. Well, the greatest manager that really sold it, boy, let me hear your top 5. I'm going to hold off on who I think I want to say.
Absolutely. Not a problem. The wrestling manager, I think that it didn't matter whether they were a former wrestler or just coming in. My number 5 wrestling manager, greatest of all time, is Jim Cornette. Number 5. Jim Cornette, of course, famously for managing the Midnight Express. You know, but Jim Cornette had a certain
Mama's boy from Louisville.
Yeah, that you really wanted the babyface to get their hands on him. And going around with his famous tennis racket.
Sure. And spending Mama's money.
Exactly.
He just got off the phone with Mama, and she said to the Omni, she wants those NWA championship belts, and Mama's going to get what she wants. Yeah. Are you talking about somebody that could talk?
Absolutely.
He was funny. He was comical. You know, you loved to hate him. You wanted him to get his. He broke his legs in that scaffold match in Atlanta, Georgia at the Omni. Remember that when he fell off the scaffold?
When you saw that happen, did you believe that he had really blown his legs out?
I did.
I didn't know what was going on.
I figured he fell wrong, and that's exactly what he did. And Dusty laughs about it till this day, when he talks about it. But he was supposed to go off the scaffold, but he fell wrong, and he really messed up his knees pretty bad that night. In Atlanta,
he should not have been up there. He should not have been up there. But you mentioned him earlier. You mentioned him earlier. My number 4 is actually Gary Hart. Gary Hart is to me a very underrated performer as it relates to professional wrestling.
He could
very
talk.
Instrumental.
He could talk. He was probably one of the only people sober in world-class championship wrestling. That's why I think he's passed on recently. But
he
back then he talked about how those guys down there in WCCW championship wrestling, the Von Erichs, and some more great wrestlers. It's one guy that I can't think of his name. He wrestled. Boy, he was a wrestler, but he had a terrible cocaine problem. Can't think of it. He was down at world class championship wrestling. Gino Hernandez.
Oh yes, definitely.
Boy, you talk about a great wrestler that died way too soon. But
Gino would have been a big star if he was able to be clean and sober. Absolutely.
But boy, all those guys, man, I don't know what they were doing in the locker room. All those Von Erichs. It was in Michael P.S. Hayes and the Freebirds. But yeah, you're right. Gary Hart. That's your number 4. Who you have at number 3?
Number 3 is the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Now, the thing about Jimmy Hart,
buzz it on that.
And I understand that, but
it's down the K's list. Why do you say that?
In Jimmy's defense, he managed a lot of teams. He was able to get a lot of teams over. I think that he was very instrumental in getting the Honky Tonk Man over as a heel. The Nasty Boys, the Hart Foundation. I was a big fan of his work in WWF at the time. It was very cartoonish, but the showmanship of it, and he was able to get heat with that megaphone. And I think that because you dislike him so much, that's a testament to how good he was.
That's all he says. Come on, baby. That's right.
Right. That's a testament.
I would say Jimmy Hart was very good in Memphis. And you're right. I would say he really helped get the Honky Tonk Man, who, for what he brought, that Elvis gimmick and his wrestling ability, he got a lot out of very little of the Honky Tonk Man. But I think he holds the record for holding the Intercontinental Championship for the longest time. Or I don't know.
Absolutely.
I think he still holds that record. So, okay,
yes.
That's number 3. Number two.
Number 2.
All time.
The legendary Captain Lou Albano.
Ah, the guiding light to maker of champions.
Captain Lou Albano.
Why do you say that?
You know, he was so he was just synopsis with the Rock and Wrestling connection, and his participation in the early WrestleManias and just tag team wrestling in general, I think is second to very few.
And he would get involved in matches a lot.
Yeah.
You know, when the wrestler would go outside Albano, oh, look at Albano, look at that fat slob, Vince would say. He had on some ripped up shirt and some he just looked like somebody, you know, from South Baltimore here. Had the cigar, the shirt was open. He was a pretty good wrestler. He was tag team champion back in the late 60s and early 70s in New York for Vince McMahon Sr. So you have Captain Lou at number 2. I think I know who you have at number 1. I think I know who you have at number 1. So I'm going to let you go ahead and do the honors. Let's see if we're on the same page.
Number 1, Bobby the Brain Heenan.
I think that's exactly where you were going.
Yeah. Bobby the Brain Heenan. Not only is he, in my opinion, the greatest pro wrestling manager, but he's also just one of the all-time best color commentators as well.
Without a doubt.
He's just phenomenal. As a, I don't know whether he did his best work in AWA or whether it was in WWF at the time. But he just had the ability to get heat. You remember when he would wear the neck brace? He managed Flair, Ken Patera, Mr. Wonderful, Bundy, Rick Rude. It's just amazing.
What can you say about the Weasel? Bobby the Brain Heenan. Now, I wouldn't have him at number 1, but he's damn near close. He's number 2 on my list. I don't really have a list, but I do know who's my all-time favorite manager, who was convincing to me that he really ran the show and had a lot of champions, and I think you know where I'm going. But Bobby the Brain Heenan was definitely number 2. It may be, and I thought, I go again. See, I wasn't really, Bobby the Brain Heenan did great stuff in the WWF. He really got over, he really had it out for Hogan, in the WWE. He also helped Hogan get over a lot, too, if you look at it that way.
Yeah,
Definitely. He really, because he had heat on, all his guys. He wanted to beat Hogan so bad. He couldn't stand, the humanoids, his catchphrases, I still want ham and egger. The humanoids, he was very comical. He was quick. He was good on the microphone. He was, he could take bumps like nobody. He took a bump. He talked about a lot of heat. But yeah, Bobby the Brain Heenan was really, really, really good at what he did in wrestling for years. He was good on all the USA shows with Gorilla Monsoon. I still sometimes look at them on WWE 24/7, and he makes me laugh when he talks with Gorilla Monsoon. But I'm gonna stick to my gun, and I'm gonna say my favorite and most convincing is on the mic, and I'm going to go with James J. Dillon. I'm going to go with James J. Dillon as my all-time favorite. Heenan, and I thought the Grand Wizard. I mean, all these guys, not necessarily in this order, but the Wizard, and of course, Freddie Blassie, Captain Lou. I mean, the list goes. What about Paulie Dangerous, Diamond? What do you think about his?
Definitely honorable mention to Paulie Dangerously. He had
a cell phone before anybody else had a cell phone.
Yeah, he was the first person I knew of with a cell phone. Definitely.
Was that big Paulie Dangerously? He could get some heat. He was okay on the mic. He's better now. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some we're missing. We're missing. What about Baby Doll?
It's funny that you mentioned her.
Now they were more valets.
Yeah. Now, what really was the difference between a valet and a wrestling manager? I guess that the valets didn't really cut promos.
They didn't really cut promos, and valets were female, and valets sometimes had love interests in some of their guys, and but Sensational Sheriff is a manager more so than a valet. And I keep leaving her out. I thought Sensational Sheriff, she was just as good. I hate to break your heart, Diamond K. She was just as good as Jimmy Hart to me in the WWE. Maybe a little more convincing. But I kind of got the same kind of vibe from Sherry, Sensational Sherry, and Jimmy Hart. But the list goes number one, Paul Jones. What did you think of him?
Who?
Number one, Paul Jones in the NWA.
Yes, number one, Paul Jones.
And the Barbarian and the Warlord.
He spent his whole time in World Championship Wrestling, to me, feuding with the Boogie Woogie Man.
There you go. Exactly.
And I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant. I liked Paul Jones. I tell you that, speaking of Paul Jones, what character I did not like, and he is no longer living, but Pistol Pez Watley. You remember when they changed his name to Shaska?
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't like that.
He had on the hat and the tuxedo jacket.
It didn't get much more racist than that, okay? And,
that's Pistol Pez Watley.
Yes, Pistol Pez Watley.
Yeah. He was good. He was he was the good old boy to me. But yeah, I mean, is there any? I'm trying to think. Is there any black managers? I'm sure we're overlooking somebody.
Well, I mean, Teddy Long. I think you definitely, he managed Doom.
Exactly. Yeah. Teddy Long, and of course, he got his start. He got his start down there at this television station at where they used to tape, TBS, the Saturday night wrestling shows on TBS. He was in charge of cleaning up the locker room when the wrestlers would leave. The bathroom and the showers, whatever they had. I don't know if they had showers, but the locker room. He was in charge of getting the TV station back in order. And Dusty Rhodes took a liking to him and gave him a job as a referee. And now the rest is history. My God, he was general manager of SmackDown. So Teddy paid the dues, or he paid the price. He bled, he sweat, as Ric Flair would say, and he paid the price. And I'm sure he's making a nice living now as Teddy Long in the WWE. He's not managing anymore, but he's pretty good on the mic now. Let me holler at you, player.
He's gotten better, and we spoke about this earlier, and I definitely wanted to say this. Ric Flair no longer in Impact Wrestling. He's been released from Impact Wrestling. So
really, what is that about? What do you think was the reason for that?
The word is that Flair and Dixie Carter definitely did not get along, and Flair. I think I really saw the beginning of the end when he went to the Hall of Fame. He had some negative comments about TNA, Impact Wrestling, that he said actually during his Hall of Fame induction this year at WrestleMania. And I guess Impact Wrestling.
Really?
Yeah, his comments, and I'm going to paraphrase them, was something to the effect of, it's glad to be in front of actual wrestling fans instead of paid models and tourists, which was his opening comments going into the Hall of Fame as part of the Horsemen this year.
Is that what he said?
That is exactly what he said. So definitely, I'm sure more information is going to come out about why Flair was released. But just the word now is just not seeing eye to eye with management. But hopefully by next week's show, we'll have more information on that.
Wow.
I'm
that's
sure
a good
that his return to WWE is probably a 90-day no compete clause away.
Exactly. And he'll come back as a manager or anti-Laurinaitis, or he might somehow join John Laurinaitis or something of them. Yeah, I mean, God, let's just hope he don't put the tights and get back in the ring.
Yeah, it's definitely time for him to...
Even though he probably can still go, it's just not fun to watch anymore.
It's not.
You know what? When Flair had trouble doing the backflip over the top rope, I said, you know what, Rick? You're probably done. You know, so, bring him back in some type of capacity, some type of general manager or something of one of the hours, since they got 3 of them. You know,
you be the general manager of the 8 o'clock hour.
I'll be 8 o'clock hour. On Raw. But yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on. There's some managers that I'm sure they're missing. Of course, the great Diamond Dallas Page started out as a manager.
Absolutely.
In AWA.
Absolutely.
If you recall. And I'm sure we're leaving out a bunch more, you know, as I just kind of think and talk. And you talked about the Boogie Woogie Man. Okay, I thought that Boogie Woogie was a bit busy, and he was really kind of a spinoff. I can't think of the guy's name. Bugsy McGraw, I think was Bugsy. Yeah, I thought of, you know, with the head and everything. But I tell you, I prefer the Handsome Jimmy persona. When he was Handsome Jimmy and Luscious Jimmy, the Valiant Brothers. Boy, they were good. Now they were from, you know, New York City, you know, and Captain Lee, and they were champions. They were champions in the WWF under the tutelage of the Guiding Light, the maker of champions, Captain Lou Albert. And like I said, you know, Fred Blassie had, of course, you know, you remember he was Ayatollah Blassie? Where he was the manager of the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov.
I do. Real quick, the next Tuesday show we're going to talk about Raw. Next Wednesday, if you are available, I want us to do a special show about tag teams. Where we go over similar to how we did today. You know, we can highlight some honorable mentions and give our list for top 5 tag teams.
I know we're going to wrap it up, but a couple more that's coming to my mind.
Absolutely.
Skandar Akbar.
Definitely.
If you remember him, Skandar Akbar. And I believe he used to be Billy Whiteshoes. Billy Whiteshoe, who was a tag champion with Chief J or Chief Strongbow. Skandar Akbar, I believe that was his name. And there was another one in WCW, World Class Championship Wrestler from overseas. I can't think of his name, but they had a bunch of them down there. You had Gary Martin. There's some managers. We'll revisit this in just casual conversation. There's managers that we're leaving out because it was some good ones. But we hit all the heavyweights.
We hit the main ones, but it's definitely
you know,
definitely
for the most part. So your number one all-time manager is Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Bobby the Brain Heenan.
And it wasn't as long as Bobby the Brain Heenan, but boy, he was convincing. You couldn't tell me what he was saying wasn't factual. It was James J. Dillon. He gave the 4 Horsemen that corporate thing that they need. Those glasses, how he put he'd take the glasses off. He was at the board meetings, his gestures, you know. You really thought this guy, you know, was a corporate guy, you know. I really thought he was probably the most convincing manager. Because he never really got involved. Every now and again he would. And he would do matches. Yeah, he would still be blading in some of those cage matches, James J. Dillon. So, I mean, but Bobby the Brain Heenan is not to be denied, but just for what I like in wrestling, and I'm old school, and, you know, the more convincing, the better. I thought what he did with the Four Horsemen probably will never be done again. In my opinion,
and he's just very convincing. He was very convincing.
Very convincing. His feud with Dusty Rhodes will go on and on. There were some great managers down in Florida. Like I said, we're just jumping over a lot of them, but we'll revisit, as more of these wrestling shows.
Absolutely. Definitely. So people can always hear us every Tuesday, 11 p.m. right here, ustreamradio.com and also blogtalkradio.com. Any parting words, sir?
Well, I was just going to ask you, of course, July 27th, DMV Wrestling returns to Baltimore. Only thing that I know is that I'm scheduled to be at ringside, and you dropped the bomb yesterday that you will also be at ringside as my partner for the play-by-play of the show. Is there any more updates about the upcoming card? Because I've given up trying to get any information because they've treated me rudely at the headquarters. So,
from what I understand, we're going to be making an announcement next week as it relates to the DMV title and the main event of that Stars and Stripes show.
Okay. All right. And we'll be making that announcement next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Okay. So we'll know more then.
Absolutely.
It's been great talking on this special edition of Managers in the World of Professional Wrestling. And I'll see everybody next Tuesday night.
Sounds good.
Okay, Diamond K. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right.